Hey, gang. James Azar here with the CISO Talk podcast. I hope you're ready for an awesome show. Before we get started today, though, go to cyberhubpodcast.com, see our series of podcasts, including our CyberHub podcast practitioner brief for those practitioners that are just yearning for non-clickbait stuff, just the stuff that we need to know about vulnerability management, patch management, and stuff that really enlightens us in terms of being a more secure organization. You can get that at cyberhubpodcast.com or on your favorite podcast listening platform by looking up for the CyberHub podcast. I've got a very, very special episode today. Extremely special because I've been planning this episode for pre-COVID. This was supposed to be an in-person pre-COVID episode at RSA. My good friend Mark Willis is joining us on the show. He is the Chief Information Security Officer for Bluescape. Mark, welcome to CISO Talk.
Thank you, James. Glad to be here finally.
I know, I'm so excited for this. When we were supposed to initially do this, so for full disclosure, Mark is celebrating his 1-year anniversary as a CISO, correct? With
Correct.
Bluescape.
14 months now.
14 months. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You've got 4 months left based on the lifetime of a CISO.
I understand that, right? And I think we do things a little differently there, where people have kind of said, "Hey, you're going to stick around past the 18 months, right?" I'm like, "Yes, absolutely." So if you can tolerate me, if you can handle me for 4 more months, yeah, we'll keep going. So far, so good. Yeah, absolutely.
I've changed my title on my signature from CISO to Chief Coffee Maker. As a barista has a longer job title, like a job length, than a CISO.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on where you go, right? What organization you go into as a CISO, right? As you go in, if you go into an organization that's had a lot of problems, I would think that there's a lot of turmoil and things are kind of up in the air, perhaps. If you come into an organization where, like Bluescape, where I came into, where the organization had matured to the point where they were ready for someone to come in and take over that role, to be the first CISO there, to be the one to come in and really help them pull things together and then launch us to the next level that we're seeing all of that come together in 2020, COVID and otherwise. There were things that we were doing even before COVID that were kicking in the gear, and then COVID really put us on the map with this whole idea of, hey, this company, everybody's going to be working from home through 2020. Okay, 2021. What kind of solution is out there that can get people to stay at home, work at home, be productive, and not have something that's boring, insecure, and that will keep their attention and get productivity higher? We just happen to be discovered as that solution to do that. It's been said that Zoom and WebEx are radio, and Bluescape is TV. So that's been we've been kind of good for good or bad. We've been stuck with that label, and so we have been able to accomplish more clients, more revenue in Q1 2020 than all of 2019. That's how things have taken off.
Well, I think it's a tale of our time, right? I can tell you that I think that's true across the board for a lot of companies, simply because of the work at home revolution that's happening is monumental. But before we get into that discussion, before we do all that fun stuff, and we've got a great podcast for y'all today. I mean, I'm serious, guys. This has been like 8 months into planning. So, we've measured 10 times, we're cutting once. You see the background, for those that are watching, you see the very, very cool background that Mark has. If you're not watching and you're listening, if I can describe it, it looks like he's sitting in would you say a tent almost?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. Hey, Mark, are you in a tent or some kind of yurt or some kind of strange building? And the answer is that the frame itself is from 1767. So for those of you who don't know, I live in Maine. I live in a house that was built in 1820. But as the ships would go back and forth, the river I live on is tidal. So the ships would go back and forth between Massachusetts and what is now Maine. And they would bring things back and forth. They traded. And what they did is they brought up this, what they call the L, ELL. They attached it to the house. And the L was framed, it's a 1767 frame. So we found the date on it. So I call it my 1767 man loft, because when we bought the house, it was all open, right? It was just a frame. And my friend Colin and I, over time, got together, laid the boards down. I can kind of show you here, on the side. There's the snowshoes in the background. We put this thing together, and over time, I did the ceilings and everything. So it kind of has that kind of attic type look to it, that type of tent type look to it. But it's interesting, James. The wood, as the beams come together, there's wooden pegs in the middle. And if you wanted to take this thing apart and say move it somewhere else, you would need a chainsaw to take that apart, because over time that oak is kind of twisted a little bit, and those pegs are so locked in, there's no way you could ever separate those boards out again. You'd have to lift it completely or take a chainsaw to it. It's just amazing how they did things back then, and how it's still going today.
Well, human ingenuity never stops to amaze me.
Right.
You think of the technology that was available in 1767, and now we look at 2020, we have a different set of technology, which is why you and I have a job. We're in information security because of our technology, and because of people who take advantage of it. But Mark, tell us a little bit about how you got started in security.
Okay, so as a lot of kids growing up in the 70s and in 80s, a lot of James Bond movies, all cool spy stuff, and ended up kind of following that path a little bit, going into the Army for 6 years in the 90s, 93 and 99. Like, I was a counterintelligence agent. Went to Haiti in 95, and then Bosnia twice in 96 and 98. And that was enough for my wife to tell me to, hey, Mark, it's time to get out. But in the midst of that, a couple things I was doing, actually 3 things I was doing within the time there. I got my master's degree in information systems management. I was also doing a lot of programming, C++, Java. Really got back into programming. It just had some in my spare time. Had a buddy that we went to the master's course together and did some programming on different projects together. So that was going on. But we also had something going on within the Army where up until that time, James, I know that from a counterintelligence background, you would know this, but maybe a lot of people on the show would not. Is that the most vulnerable time for a spy to be caught is when the spy and the handler actually physically meet. That's when you want to get them, right? That's when you want to get both. From there, who knows where it goes. We came up with an idea, a plan that said, hey, what if the spy and the handler didn't have to meet? And remember, this is the 90s. What if somebody within DoD was actually using something like PGP? They installed PGP on their computer. And what if they were using anonymous remailers to send messages that were encrypted? And what if they were using things like steganography to hide messages within pictures? You think about back in the 90s, we didn't have all the data loss prevention. We didn't have all the types of security controls in and around network traffic to detect these types of things that we have today. And so it was very possible for someone to be committing espionage right under your nose, and you wouldn't know it. Not that people were, but we put together this program called Digital Tradecraft. And we said that theoretically it's possible that somebody could be leveraging one or more of these tools, or all 3 of them together, to really commit espionage, and therefore the spy and the handler never have to meet again. And that was a kind of a revolutionary step forward that really got me thinking, hey, maybe this is the direction, the kind of world that I want to really go into. But when I got out of the Army, I ended up working for Sterling Software, a company that got bought out by Northrop Grumman. Still worked with the Army, the U.S. Army INSCOM at Fort Belvoir, was doing a lot of programming there. But as I developed in application security, I realized, as I learned about things, the difference between, dynamic SQL, prepared statements, and stored procedures, right? I learned, hey, there's a difference between these and what's least secure and what's most secure. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. Not only can you program, but you can learn about this application security. There's something to it. I want to learn more about it. And then later on in the 2000s, I got into, I had a friend who had a company that we been in the Army together. He said, hey, can you moonlight and do some ethical hacking for me? I think, as a developer, you're going to be able to shoot fish in a barrel. So I did some moonlighting. I found that I was finding all kinds of stuff in different clients' websites, all kinds of stuff that we would just totally freak out today. Social security numbers everywhere, resumes everywhere, all kinds of personal information, PII, everything out there, just unencrypted, just wide open. And what I also found was that when we presented this information to the customers, instead of getting some blowback and saying, "Whoa," it was like, "Hey, thank you very much. Can you keep going and find other things for us, right? Can you keep digging?" So we want to be clean. So with that in mind, I was like, this is really, not only is it kind of fun to do these types of things, right? And learning, people kind of knew the basics of network security. That was okay. That was a necessary thing that you want to know about. But application security and hacking and defending it seemed to be far more interesting to me at that time. And so in around 2009, I ended up moving on to a job with Aetna. Aetna had been looking to build up a software security program. So I was there at the very beginning with the first software security team. And then as things grew, as things evolved, we got bigger and bigger with global security at Aetna. We got to be over 200 plus people. And I ended up becoming the director of software and mobile security for Aetna. But before that was the leader of the ethical hacking team. And so we built all that out. And as you get into ethical hacking and I'm a CEH, and as you work within the enterprise, you're working with the network folks, you're working with the folks in policy and governance, you're working with all kinds of people throughout the entire security organization, especially if you find something, and then you have to bring it forward and do the incident response. Everybody had their turn doing IR at Aetna. Everybody had their turn, looking through on my team, vulnerability reports, pen tests, and what have you. I ended up building out a team that was, and some people would consider to be the number one software security program in the world. I mean, I wouldn't say that myself all the time, but other people in my leadership would. And I was like, well, great, you're putting a big target on our back. But they believed, and this is what we would talk about today, that the leadership believed in what we were doing so much that they would go out and say that, even though we were the ones that actually had to do the work. So it was kind of a double-edged sword. So that's how I kind of got into it. And then just over a year ago, right, about 14, 15 months ago, I had a friend in the Silicone Valley who says, hey, I don't know if you're looking to move on and do something else, but there is a startup called Bluescape, and they're looking for someone who I believe, you might be the right person for that. So after about 10, 11 interviews, I flew out there, and I'm from California originally, so it's not a big deal to fly out there. I was like, this is a really cool company, a really cool business offering, a really cool. The people I met were very cool, and I'm like, I think I could do this. I think this is where I'd like to move on to, and so I did. Again, 14 months ago, and it's just been on a rocket ship ever since.
It's very it's very interesting to hear your background because military healthcare to now kind of a Silicone Valley startup. Not exactly the path that people take. Most people start in a startup. I get white hair because I only work with startups, right? I say if you're a CISO, you're bound to shave years off your life just because of the role. But if you're a startup CISO, you're bound to shave 3 times the amount of years off your life, simply because you're dealing with similar challenges without the money.
Yes, and that is a challenge. Where any startup, you are really we'd say working 25 cents on the dollar, right?
Yeah.
You are leveraging open source, wherever you can. If it's sound and if it's the business need and the security need, if you can use open source, then so be it. That's great. There are times where you need to engage vendors and bring down get the best vendor for the best price. But you may have the vendors and the tools, but you may not have the number of people that you would have in a large organization. So one of the things that we have at Bluescape is that a complete awareness of my role, but then working with our engineers and our architects and our ops and our cloud, we all work together as a team. And I like to say that I'm very respectful of the other pieces of the organization, but there are times, right, and I'll put it into the JIRA ticket, guys, we need to get this done. and you pull in the right people. You need to be respectful of the work that they have to do for the business side. But once you're able to present the case of, we need to implement these security controls or this additional security control or this additional piece of security for this reason, if you can explain why it's necessary, then I really have had little to no pushback. It's just a matter of organizing that effort in and around the current projects and leveraging what I say the organic talent within the organization. Bluescape has some really super smart people who are really interested in learning more about security. So it's really a win-win, right? So we get to come in, prioritize the security controls and the way forward that we need to go, but you also got to balance it with the workload of the architects and the engineers. But once the bandwidth is there and you can get these things implemented, things tend to move pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that's so critical in terms of working across teams, because it's the only way as a CISO in a startup in a small company who may not have a big team, right? Who doesn't have a bunch of VPs and SVPs and directors and it's so critical to be able to work with the existing DevOps team and, like you said, architects and engineers and cloud, because they're really your eyes and ears too.
Yeah.
Those relationships help you avoid some of the things where you end up going and buying tools in an enterprise because you don't know it. Like getting visibility, like just people randomly putting out cloud instances with data to test something, and they don't encrypt the data, they don't even use anything. They're just putting out a cloud instance for 3 days, and then they forget to take it down. They just leave it up there.
Yeah. Yep.
In a startup, that would never happen because of that relationship is there.
And we have the controls already in place. Not to name vendors or controls, but we do have those controls in place that would let us know. Send us an alert if something like that were to happen. We do get alerts like that even when people are standing up, new instances. Even if it's totally legit, we still get alerts and we double check just to make sure that what we're seeing is legitimate behavior. We have a program already in place that handles that almost on a daily basis as we build out new things.
That's excellent. So tell me a little bit, as we talk a little bit, I want to talk to you a little bit about leadership. And I think in security, the discussion around leadership is now starting to really take shape. I know that in a lot of different posts I do on LinkedIn now, we see the idea of anyone can go out and get a job, and a lot of leaders discount, a lot of different things, because there's the idea of when I hire someone, I don't want a follower, I kind of want a leader per se. So what, in your opinion, what are some of the key skills and qualities you look for when you're interviewing people to be part of your security team?
Yeah, so right now, I'm looking for people that are hungry, that are go-getters, that are willing to, wake up on East Coast time, start working on East Coast time and end it on West Coast time. As you know, with the startup, right? That's how I just kind of easily frame it, that you're going to work some long hours. Not all the time, but there are times when everything, you're moving out and things move fast. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be a know-it-all. I don't want to know it all. I don't want someone coming in and saying, okay, well, you know what, cool. In my last place that I was at, we did it all this way, and we're going to do it this way, and you guys have it all wrong, or why are you doing all this? We don't have time for that, at least right now, right? Question people. It's always good to question things, right? But I don't need someone coming in and trying to take over the program or even a piece of it. I need someone that can work with me and the rest of the team as a team player. That's what I'm really trying to hammer here, is that we need team players. We really have a culture at Bluescape where everyone kind of puts their ego aside and we work together to get things done, regardless of what your title may be. I'm working with, at Peter Jackson at the CEO level, and I'm working all the way down, with folks in the front desk, HR, and with ops and engineers. It depends on the work. You're going back and forth. But for my team, I just hired someone, a young guy who's got his master's degree. has a lot of good theoretical knowledge and some decent hands-on knowledge, and then some other knowledge in other areas. But he's hungry. He wants to learn, and he was a good cultural fit within the company. I knew that that this person, I could have him work with the engineers and the architects or the ops people, and everything would work. You just kind of know when you go through the interview process, is this the type of person that I want to be talking to on Slack all day long? Is this the type of person that I want to bring in the meetings and cut loose with a vendor to get something stood up, right? Those are the types of things I'm looking for. Now that might be totally different in some other organization. That might be totally, counter to what some CISOs would want. But for what we're doing, I know exactly what I'm looking for, and I found someone on my team. Now we do have, for example, an opening for. And this is not a HR thing here, but we do have a software security architect, right, that we're looking for. And this person would be like somebody that would be like a hybrid between working for me and working with the engineers and the architects. And I'm actually meeting with the lead of that area later on today to help him formulate the job description. We're going to work together to get the words right, the magic words into the rec. So anybody who sees this rec is going to say, okay, I can do that, or now I'll pass. So again, that's a prime example of something going on later today of working together with the engineers and the architects to get this language together, pass it around, and then go to HR and have it, I guess, deployed to the website. So that's something that we're working on. I really think we need to have people who are open to new ideas, who want to move into areas that maybe they're uncomfortable with, right? Over my career as a leader, I've brought in people that, oh, I can't do this, Mark. This is too much. I don't know why you've given me this project. I believe in you. I believe you can do that, right? So even if the person may not even have the perfect skill set, if I just instinctively feel that person can do it, I'm going to hand that off to them, and I'll guide them and help mentor them to get there and bring in the people to support them. I've never put somebody out on their own and cut them loose and said, well, you're gonna sink or swim on your own and no one's going to help you. We're all here to help you. It would take quite a bit for someone on my team to fail, because we're not going to let them fail. If for some reason something doesn't go exactly right, we learn from it and move on. But I hope that kind of gives you a picture of what I'm looking for within someone from Bluescape.
Well, to me, absolutely. I think for people listening, it's refreshing, because a lot of times, I posted something earlier this week on LinkedIn, and I had a conversation with someone who got started in cyber about 4 years ago. Really kind of decided to do a career change and decided to get into cyber, and they did a basic security plus cert and went and got some hands-on, but they were middle management beforehand, so they took a step back because they wanted to start a new career and realized that can push them forward. And so the person asked me, James, I want to get a middle management job in cyber. What cert should I go for? And so I was like, you know what? That's a great question. I'm going to post it on LinkedIn. It got over 50 replies, literally within 24 hours, of all kinds of different people that weighed in. And a lot of times, we're like, CISSP seems to be what almost generally is being asked of. But there were so many different opinions around the kind of stuff people look for. Several people said, hey, when I hire someone in middle management, I don't care what security certs they have. I want a PMP, because they're going to be running projects. So I want to know that they'll be able to be, they're more organized and understand project management than they do security. They go, no cert will tell me if they understand security, but a PMP will let me know they know how to manage the project. And I'm more concerned with project management because I can bring the talent around that person.
Sure.
And so forth. And so it's very interesting to hear you say that, because that's another common box that was missing there, which is, we want people to succeed. It doesn't matter what you come with. We're not looking for a cert. We're looking for someone being hungry, and experience trumps. A lot of people spoke of experience.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times you're not the one looking at the CVs. You're creating a rec. It's going to HR,
Mm-hmm.
and HR is looking at your requirements. And if these people don't hit your requirements, you don't even get to see them.
Yeah, I think also one of the things I'm looking for too, I mean, some of the bonuses, right? Does the person have developer experience? Do they have they written programs? If they say they do, cool. Then that leads me to the next question, right? So if anybody who's ever going to interview with me, who's watching this, right, I'm going to ask you, okay, so you say you developed such and such. What language did you do? What language did you write it in? And what was your approach? How did you write it? How did you go about creating this program? And this is really important to me. And this is not just for programming, but for any project. If someone says, well, when I was at company such and such, I did this. Ask them about it and find out, do they really start to get into the details, right? Do they say, well, I pulled in 3 people. We met, twice a week. We put everything together in this type of, spreadsheet. We use this kind of language. We pulled in different tools better, and we mapped it out over 90 days or whatever it was, or 60 days. And I reported to so-and-so, and we had milestones along the way. If they start getting into specifics, right, about what they did and how they did it, and it gets beyond just fluff, but they actually get specifics as to different pieces, then you're going to know the person probably actually did it. In my opinion, right? You're gonna find out, okay, this person's not, full of BS. They're actually, someone who actually accomplished something. Whereas if you ask those same questions to somebody and they kind of look around and they kind of flounder a little bit and they try to change the subject or, divert and just can't answer it, then you're gonna know that maybe they were a part of some program, right? But they weren't the ones that actually did it. I've used that as a barometer quite a bit to kind of cut the wheat from the chaff through the interview process.
Let's talk a little bit about leadership from a CISO role perspective. What skills do you think it's vital for a CISO to have in order to be an effective leader of his team?
Yeah, you've got to be a really good listener. Not a good listener, but a great listener. You've really got to be someone who listens and listens to the business side. I was taught long ago that without the business, there's no security, right? You're going to need a job somewhere else, right? The business runs the show. Your job as a CISO is to understand the business requirements and then work with the business to allow them to understand what are the threats. And some people would say risks, right? Some people don't like to use the word risk. They think it scares off people. But your job is to really present the big picture to the business as to the current state of security within the organization, and then the top threats that can get us hurt, that have not been addressed, that have not been looked at for whatever reason. You don't point fingers, right or wrong, but hey, leadership, I understand that we're doing this and moving out. However, did you realize that we have a huge gap here and here? And if we are to be taken seriously by customers and to stay out of the headlines, and for, because it's the right thing to do as a matter of due diligence, we need to prioritize these 3 things, for example. And then we need to make sure that no matter what happens, come 60 days, 90 days, whatever the timeline would be, we have to imagine a world where those are complete. We can't keep going if these types of things are not addressed and not fixed. And so you can't go after everything. You can't boil the ocean. You can't go after the entire attack surface at once. You've got to understand the attack surface and be able to explain that to the leadership of the company, but also at the same time listen to them as to where the company's going, and listen to the folks around you in ops and cloud and engineers and architects. And you take all of that in and you filter it down into the message that's going to resonate with the company, with the leadership, as you make your case for security. So it's some people may look at it as, well, I've got to put a briefing together and tell the leadership all about this, all these great ideas I have. And you might have great ideas, but if they're not in line with the business, you're going to have problems. And so you've got to be able to establish that connection between the business side and listen to them. One of the things that I've been able to do, and again, James, as I have talked to you before, one of my goals at Bluescape, perhaps the ultimate goal, is to build out our security program to ensure that the Bluescape enterprise security program, whether it be in our corporate environment, in our AWS environment, everything that we do rivals that of a Fortune 50 company on 25 cents on the dollar. We have to do it on a startup budget, but we can do it. And we've done many things already in the last 14 months to help us get there. We're not done yet, but by having that close relationship, for example, with Kevin, our CFO, right? He and I work together quite a bit, right? I have to present my case to Kevin when I need something, right? It's got to be in line with the business. It has to make sense to him, and it has to be something that is going to help us fill a gap, but at the same time present extra value to the company as we onboard new customers and provide that information to existing customers. So one of the things that I've been blessed to be able to have is a law degree, even though 4 years of law school was at George Mason was tough, right? It really helps in the case of working with Kevin and our legal team when we get contracts or proposed contracts, terms and conditions, and you're dealing with all kinds of different vendors and customers, right? Hey, Mark, can you jump on a call? We need to talk about this. Can you look at this document? So as a CISO, I might be doing things a little bit differently than some CISOs. I'm actually looking at legal documents and giving it a once over before it even goes to the lawyers. So when I talk to the lawyers, I'll say, hey, I did my review. I'm not a lawyer, but I did my review. Here are the things that I think are very important for us to understand and that might get us hurt, but it ultimately goes back to the lawyer to make their final legal recommendations, right? But that's been a big part of what I do on top of all the technical part of things that we do. So that has helped instill confidence within the C-suite, especially with our CFO, that when Mark brings something forward, and I don't do it all the time, you have to make sure you don't wear out that welcome, right? But when you bring something forward and you say, hey, we've got something here that we need to talk about, that it's taken very seriously.
So critical. There was so much wisdom in what you just said in terms of just not only leadership, but working across the enterprise to really build relationships, build fans, and so often not wearing that welcome. So many security people will go, I got a great relationship with my CIO, with my CFO, with the chief legal officer. I to go to him every day with stuff, and I'm like, are you sure that's right? Like, maybe you shouldn't go every day. Maybe you should go, like, I don't know, do lunch once every 2 weeks, talk about, prioritize everything.
Yeah, it depends, right? It depends on what kind of relationship. If you're in a company, let's say a big corporation where, you for whatever reason you're like this with the CIO, right? You're friends, you know each other from prior experience, or there's just that relationship, and that's one thing, right? And then you want to keep that going, right? You don't want to deliberately distance yourself from somebody that if you've got that open door, but in the case where everybody's doing, like, as you know, with the startup, everybody's super maxed out and busy, right? You got to pick and choose the times to state your case and state it well and state it very efficiently, and not waste people's time. And that's just not something you want to do every day.
So Mark, let's talk a little bit about cyber, because security as a whole is a very big term. I always like to say that when people silo security, they're siloing an engine that runs the entire vehicle, right? Security can't be siloed. It's really got to run across. It's like finance. It's like ops, right? It's like HR. HR isn't siloed. HR runs across the entire organization. So does security. What aspect of security do you spend the most time on in your current role, and why do you spend so much time on that one aspect of security?
Yeah. I would say, I mean, honestly, I thought about this, right? Because I knew that this might be a question you would ask. And people say, well, what's the biggest part of your job? And I would say it depends. It depends on where we're at with what's going on. I mean, for example, a good part, part of the job of the CISO is, business recovery, disaster recovery, business continuity, right? BCDR. Now, leading up to RSA, where we were supposed to meet, and then things kind of pushed aside, right? We were looking at a BCDR, scenario, tabletop exercise this year, without take COVID out of it. We were going to do at the office in San Carlos, we were going to do a full-fledged active shooter drill, right? Because a lot of people were very concerned about that. Think about leading up to that time, it was just one, shooting after another all the time. And so a lot of people were like, hey, what do we do? So we said, well, this is a great scenario to go through, right? Train everybody on it, and then actually, again, pull in the right people to know, and then the rest not. And so that all went out the window when COVID-19 hit, right? We were like, well, everybody's working from home. And to his credit, Peter Jackson, our CEO, was really out in front of the whole thing in February, starting to say, okay, something's going on here, right? We need to start thinking about, backing out. And before you know it, Bluescape became 100% work at home. We still have people going in the office periodically to pick up machines and do things like that. But my role shifted from this tabletop exercise with an active shooter to how are we going to protect our entire workforce working from home? So that was one thing that we had to shift gears, right? We had some people work at home, but not like this. And this is a common scenario for a lot of CISOs, a lot of CIOs. They're all trying to figure this out, right? I think we've come through it, and we're a lot better off now than we were. But people were like, okay, do we have everybody work in a VM? Do we have all the right endpoint protections and NIST security best practices? We don't know what their home router's like. We don't have little men running around everybody's house to make sure they're secure. So you do what you can with what you've got. Increase the security awareness training. We have we implemented enhanced email protection, endpoint security. Make sure everything was up to date. Lots of newsletters, lots of training, lots of town halls, lots of things that just constant reminders, right? Don't if you're not sure, don't click on it. Just forward it to Bluescape security. We'll take the rest. It emphasize that everyone's on the front lines when it comes to phishing, email or voice phishing, and things like that. And we made that transition, but also one of the things I had to do, I got with HR, and because the county of San Mateo had a restriction on people traveling and going to work and all that, and we had to let our people know that if you went to the office, if you were stopped by a law enforcement officer, here's the reason. You have to explain to them why you're going to the office. So we got with legal and made sure all that was put together to protect our employees in the event they had to go to the office. That was something that we would cover them. So these are all new things that we hadn't thought of, back in February when we were at RSA, right?
To be fair, no one thought of it, right? I mean, we were at RSA. It was very, very interesting. I said it. RSA was the last real conference we did.
Yeah.
And even then, people were, elbow. We knew something was happening.
Yeah.
About 3 weeks before RSA, I hosted one of my CISO roundtables in Dallas. And it was right when President Trump had banned flights from China. They were looking at banning flights from Europe.
Yeah.
And I remember we got on the flight from Atlanta to Dallas. And I'm looking around the airplane, and some people have masks on, other don't. There was no mask mandate at the time. This was February.
Yeah.
Right, early February. But at RSA, there were a lot more people wearing masks on the flights.
Yeah. It was eerie because we had a booth at RSA, and we were right across from the Sneak company, and so we were talking to them quite a bit. Nobody was really wearing masks. We had the hand sanitizer, right? But there were just a few masks, and then it turned out, that. And another thing, as part of doing your job at that point in time, we're still really heavily involved with clients who want Bluescape for a situational awareness type of a solution. And that was one of the things that we were really talking about a lot at RSA. And because, evidently, because I did a decent job at RSA, they're like, hey, Mark, can you stay over the weekend and go down to San Diego for the West Conference with all the military, right? With the Navy and the Marines. I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool, because you get to see all the cool equipment. And so we were there for a couple of days and spent a lot of time with different vendors, and nobody was wearing a mask either. But it was getting towards the end of February, right? And it was getting, when I flew home from San Diego to Philly to Maine, still only a couple people wearing masks. But I really felt like this might be the last flight I'm taking for quite a while. I just kind of felt it, right? It was just eerie. And
well, it felt like it was like an episode of Doom, right? Like you know something is coming around the corner, you hear it coming, but you're kind of wanting to ignore it until it's in your face.
Yeah.
And I think COVID, which has been a real challenge, has also made CISOs, I think, far more relevant.
Yeah, it is, and I think the role of CISO is where maybe in the case of Bluescape, right? I worked with Natalie in HR on some things already, but she and I really had to work together to make sure that we were covering everything from from a work at home and going back in the office perspective. So my time with HR increased because of COVID, right? And then being able to put together a work at home security best practices program, which I started to work on in March. As we saw more and more people and reading the tea leaves that Peter Jackson, our CEO, was leaning towards, hey, if you want to work from home, go ahead. And pretty soon it became like, it's so bad, no one's going back in the office. So you kind of saw it coming. So I was like, I need to get ahead of this and start putting together some kind of work at home security best practice. So what we have, one of the first things I built, actually the first thing I built when I got into Bluescape, was this huge Confluence page called our Security Center, where it's a one-stop shop for everybody in the company to know what to do, report an incident, report a suspicious email, and then we've got a link at the top in red, security, work at home security best practices. We included that in there. So everybody in the company can just simply go to the Security Center, click on the work at home security best practices. We've got our mobile and teleworking policy there that's ISO certified. That tells people the policy guidance. And then we also had the NIST security best practices as far as how to configure your router at home in the event you haven't done so. And so those are just a few things, plus constant reiteration of working at home, with email protection, all these things, reporting anything suspicious to security at bluescape.com. And I have to say, for a company of about 250 people, the people are very, very, the Bluescapers are very, very security aware. I do get, sometimes it's just like some spam email, like, hey, I'd like to call you for, let's talk about such and such product. Mark, is this an attack? I'm like, no, it's just a cheesy sales pitch, but thank you for the email. Keep them coming, right? We're never going to turn them away, right? So people are definitely aware if they're getting an email from somebody that they don't know, especially if it's got a link or attachment in it. So far, so good. And we just have to keep that going. And that's a balance in itself, right? You want to make sure that you keep people aware and kind of wired tight on that issue, but you don't want to keep talking about it too much. You don't want to be a broken record, but you don't want to let it lapse too long either. You want to make sure you've got that right balance of constant, periodic reiteration of the things that can get us hurt. And so far, so good. It seems to be working out.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole work from home thing it's been very, very interesting. It seems like it's kind of moved up a timeline for a lot of companies. I know some companies were saying, hey, by 2025, we want to be 50-50.
Yeah.
Now everyone's like, we're 50-50 now. We're looking how we can be 70-30, 70% work from home, come into the office a day or two a week, period.
Yeah. Well, a lot of surveys out there are finding that employees, it was almost like this curve, right? Where in the beginning was like, I don't want to work from home. I want to go in the office. I don't want to work. And then as time goes on, the amount of people accepting working from home and saying, it's not so bad after all, I can work in my pajamas. I don't have to jump in the car and drive it, half an hour to an hour each way. Um, you know, I get to spend more time with my family, perhaps. But at the same time, people feel compelled perhaps to work more hours. They feel like I really can't turn off that computer, right? Now that I've got it in front of me, you've got this other thing going on. And again, to his credit, Peter Jackson, our CEO, just put on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, hey, it's okay to disconnect. The best people that are productive, most productive people are the ones that take a break. But that's not an easy thing for a lot of people to do. They want to be seen on Slack as, be available. They want to be there to help others. They want to be part of the action, right? We've got a lot of things going on, and I want to be part of the action. I see a lot of things going on. I want to be there to help in case something comes up, right? It's just nature. But there comes a point where you've got to disconnect and take a break. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I want to kind of bring this out because, I was having this discussion, and I think it's really valid for security purposes, right? So security awareness programs as a whole, when you were in an office, when you were in a place where you could run it, you'd have, people would do the online training, or, you would do the kind of, I don't know how you did your awareness trainings. It could have been, maybe going to address a specific group. I'm one of those that I believe that there's no one uniform
Right.
Awareness training, that different departments need to be trained about different things at different times because the threats vary. Does that make sense? Like to me, accounting, finance, they need more awareness training. They need to be constantly kind of put in a spot where they're always thinking about stuff they do, because any attack on them means monetary harm for the organization. And that's something you don't want to have taken place, which is different from, let's say, for example, DevOps and, open source secure code awareness, GitHub, and the different things that go on in their realm, which is completely different. So like I'm in the concept of, I love the different security awareness programs that are out there, and there's some great vendors, and one of them actually sponsors our show. So, they have great products, but then at the same time, though, not everything is addressed in one awareness training, and not all the organization is the same. And what I found to be the challenge during COVID was, you're right about one thing. People want to be productive, and people first hated it, and now they love it. They don't want to come back to the office.
Yeah.
Right. And so what ends up happening, though, is people work in spurts now. So I can wake up in the morning, and if I've got kids, I may wake up at 6 a.m. before my kids even wake up, and work and answer a few emails. And then as my kids get up, I'll go upstairs and I'll, help my spouse in getting the kids ready and getting them plugged in and feeding them breakfast. And I spend time with my family. I come back downstairs. I jump on a bunch of calls. I go upstairs for, I go have lunch with my family, break, come back down, work again, go help my wife put the kids to sleep, spend some quality time before the kids go to bed, which before you'd be on the road. So now you go, all right, at 5 o'clock, I'm really going to check out until about 8. Once the kids are back to bed, I'm going to go clock back in for 2 more hours and work. And what that's done is it's created spurts where, as a person gets used to that routine, security becomes a kind of an afterthought. Because if you're, we all have children, so we know that children are unexpected. We also know that children, you have a schedule for a child. That schedule is more for you and less for the child, because, the children are just children. That's exactly what they are. They're not adults. That's why we call them children. I found that to be a real challenge in terms of security awareness. The idea that people are off and on, off and on, off and on, off and on, that sometimes, things are happening in the background. They're easily distracted. There's things that are going on that you can't really control the environment, and it creates a that moment of, oh shoot, I clicked that link, or I opened that attachment, and then that reporting aspect of it, which becomes like, do I really want to report it, or do I just
I mean, we have it to where really that people really feel like they can report anything, and we're not going to hold it against them, right? If God forbid something happens, just let us know about it, right? We're not gonna take you out in the public square and throw tomatoes at you. We're going to handle it, right? But we can't help you. We can't help the company if we don't know about it. So best thing to do is just be forthright and honest, because sooner or later we're going to find out about it anyway, one way or another. So so far so good. People, I think people get the message on that. Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways I would say that by taking those periodic breaks, it does refresh the brain. It does refresh people to feel kind of energized to get back on and say, okay, I've taken a good decent break, almost like taking a nap, right? Where you just take a break and you come back and now you're kind of recharged a little bit, and a little more refocused. It's a mixture, James, and I don't know if we have all we don't have all the data, I don't think, to really break it all down yet. This is going to be a very interesting case study for a lot of scientists, social scientists, behavioral scientists, to see, when they look back on this, how it all played out. I'll keep an eye on your thoughts about the security part. I haven't seen that impact on us thus far, but it doesn't mean obviously it couldn't happen. So I'll keep that in mind. Again, being a good listener, I'm listening and saying, hey, something that I really haven't experienced yet, but that's a good thing, a good little footnote to put down, that, something to think about.
Well, it's we look at security as a whole, right? Holistically, and I don't want to get stuck on work from home. I think we have far more interesting stuff to discuss. But if you look at how people view security within an organization, I also see the different generational gaps when we talk about awareness trainings. I see that the people who are freshly graduated or within 5 years of college graduation or finishing their studies are far more aware of things from a security perspective than, say, someone who's been 20 years working. There's just, and that's part of, those people technologically adapted very different than, the people with a little bit more work experience. But across an organization, I've seen it, being that I work with multiple startups at the moment, it's very interesting for me because, I go to different organizations and I see the culture starts with the leadership, with the CEO, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, you talk about Peter Jackson, I think everything starts with the CEO. If the CEO is able to deliver that, we don't have a department in this company that's a hindrance to the organization, but rather they're here to support the business. And then CISOs like yourself will come in and say, hey, I'm not here to tell you no. You tell me what you want to do, we'll find a way to make it happen, right? That both, ensures that you're able to get your job done and get a business product done, but also do so securely. There's an aspect to that. There's never a no. I have a sign, in that says, we never say no. Right? Like we don't say no. Never say, the word no does not come out of your mouth. Say, I want to think about it. Say, let me check it. I'll get back to you. You're not sure. Pass it down. We've got enough smart people that know how to solve problems. Mm-hmm. But don't say no. Because I think the moment you say no to someone is the moment they get turned off by security and they're no longer listening. And you talk about active listening. When someone tells you no right off the bat, you go, hey, I have an idea. No. You turn off. Automatically. Human behavior, no matter how good you are.
Yeah. That seems to be something from the past that people still hold on to. They come in when they talk to security, maybe they're a little bit like, on defense. Thinking, oh, this guy's just going to say no and shut me down, right? So maybe I shouldn't say anything or even ask or talk about it. But you're right. There's no point in saying no. It's like, okay, again, that goes back to part of the listening, right? Listen, hear it through. What is the individual on the other side of this conversation, trying to explain to me? Obviously, it's very important to them, and it's very important to the organization. So you need to listen. And as you're listening, you should be thinking about, how can I work with this person and this project to make it secure? And like you said, if you've got some ideas, you can say, well, cool, that, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Right? I know that we could probably do this. But if you don't know, but you're like, I need to take it back and think about it, say, yeah, it's cool. I'm taking some notes. Thank you for sharing. I'll take this under consideration and come back and let you know what my recommendations are. A good example of this, one of the guys I work with, Michael, in engineering, pinged me on Slack yesterday, and he's like, "Hey, Mark, we've got a new initiative going on with such and such API with this new functionality. Would you mind taking a look at the Confluence page? And we've tagged you from a security perspective to do a security review, or at least review what we're contemplating, and give us your opinion." Now that right there, right, just that alone is something that you don't see in every organization. Right. When they come to me, I mean, I've suddenly, and over the last year, say, when these new initiatives, these new projects are coming out, ensure that I'm involved. Tag my name, bring me in, we'll go through it together, and at least I'm aware of what is going on. So at a minimum, we can schedule dynamic scanning or pen testing or code reviews or whatever's necessary, threat modeling, or whatever we need to do to help support you from a security perspective. We can do that, but I can't help you if I don't know about it, right?
Right.
So now I'm being told about this new API initiative, right? And I talked to him on Slack for a while last night, and it's a really good back and forth. And so by establishing that connection and me listening to Michael and Michael listening to me, it's worked out very well. We've been working together closely for over a year now, and we've accomplished a lot together. And he's just one person at Bluescape. There's others that I'd like to mention. Alan and people who will see this will know what I'm talking about. Ruben and Oswald and Nick. We have a great team. I mean, there's so many people that I've worked with at Bluescape who, we present ideas to each other. We discuss them. We work together as a team, and we get to the other side. By the time it hits the production, the product is out there. It's had a security review, in one way or many ways, depending on what that new feature might be. So I have to say, I'm very, very impressed from a startup perspective. Our approach has been one of security first from day one since I got there, and that was one of the reasons why I joined the company. I think I said in one of my interviews, well, you guys talk about security first. Can you tell me what that means? What does that mean to you? And as they went through the different components of what the things they'd already done or wanted to do in the AWS environment, in the corporate environment, I was like, okay, these guys, they get it. They totally get it. And it's been a very good relationship.
Brilliant. So let me ask you this. As you look at security practitioners across the US today, across the world, within our network,
right,
what are some of the things that what's a challenge that you see us really, we've overcome this. This is no longer an issue. And what challenge do you go, we still have a long ways to go before we can solve this specific challenge that exists for security folks?
I think it's kind of wrapped within the same. It's kind of like one of those Russian dolls. You just kind of keep pulling.
The babushkas.
Babushkas, yeah. It's like it's all compacted within the little doll, right? You start pulling it back, saying DevOps, DevSecOps, right? So we all know we have to have it, right? Especially as a software company, but everybody knows that DevOps is really, they've inserted sec in the middle, right? Some people will argue all day over beers about whether sec should be in there or not, but security has to be part of DevOps, right? And so they know, I think there's a realization that no longer do we have to sit there and say security can't be part of it. It's got to be part of it. It's got to be automated as much as possible. You've got to have as much visibility as far left as you can, the whole thing, right? Everybody, I think a lot of that I think, I would hope, has been put to rest. That has to be done. The other side of it within the doll is you start getting down into the, is how is that being done? Is it actually being done? Theoretically, people know it's been put to rest that we have to have security within our DevOps environment, automated as part of the build process, right? The other part is, has it actually been done? Is it being done, or are we just still talking about it, right? I think that's still going on in the industry that has not been conquered yet, is people still arguing about how that's to be done, how much automated, how much manual, what types of tests, those types of things are still going on that are still being ironed out. So I would say, again, within that same little Russian doll, you've got this DevSecOps discussion going on. One half we know we have to do it. The other half still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, DevOps is a very I think that's a first, by the way. I'll have to go through my Excel. I keep an Excel of a log of that specific question, but I don't think I've ever seen DevOps on there. Typically, we talk about awareness, we talk about, endpoint protection, or, people talk about cloud. Very rarely do people talk about DevOps, but DevOps is critical. It's a very interesting point because, Bluescape, for example, you guys are US based. I speak to a lot of CISOs, and in fact, some of my startups where we have our DevOps team in 4 different parts of the world. And so I've got DevOps folks that, are in places of the world that I don't say I don't trust, but I'm a bit more aware of the kind of fraud and IP theft that happens there, and the what I like to call, there's a word in Hebrew, and it's called kombina. And for those who listen from Israel who speak Hebrew, when they hear the word kombina, they get a big smile on their face and they go, ah. The kombina essentially comes from the word combination.
Okay.
And what it means is that in Israel, there's a really interesting thing. So a kombina means that my uncle may know someone who knows someone there, and they're going to do a kombina to help me get something that I otherwise wouldn't get so easily or so swiftly if I didn't have that kombina.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a hookup, right? Like kombina is kind of like a hookup. Like you've got a shortcut to get somewhere. People know people know people, and so forth. And so I was in Israel last month, and speaking to one of the DevOps teams. And so, and yes, I did travel during COVID. A lot of people know this. I was in Israel for a month. I had to do 2 weeks in quarantine, and then I spent 2 weeks enjoying the beach of Tel Aviv and just the sun and riding a scooter around town, and it was magnificent. Couldn't ask for anything better, especially after being locked up, in your house in the States. Just being able to go outside and just smell the fresh ocean. That you're in Maine. Just the ocean is completely different.
Yeah.
So, kind of looking at that, one of the very interesting aspects of speaking to our DevOps team was, we have a DevOps team there, and then their team is split up to 2 other places, one in Europe and one in Asia. And so I started asking, our head of DevOps. I go, well, how are we monitoring? How are we checking the fact, they're working remote, different parts of the world, so forth. And we had to really put our heads together to figure out a plan of how do you monitor DevOps that are now working from home in environments you really don't control, because typically, when you outsource or you work from a different office or with a partner in a different nation, they typically have those controls, and very quickly, you're picking up the phone and asking them like, hey, so what are you guys doing? How are you guys monitoring this? And you realize it's not efficient. And so it's very interesting that you said DevOps. That was kind of a story. I was just like, you brought it up. I was like, wow, that's literally what I've spent the last 2 months working on is DevOps.
Yeah, there's a difference between the DevOps monitoring, right? Are we up? Are we down? And then there's the security part of it, right? Of the, is our code being scanned for every build, new features being scanned and reviewed? If so, where are the findings at? Where's the dashboard? How are we alerted to any critical or high findings? Do we just do it? Is it a pass through, or do we break the build? Right? These are all things that I think about a lot, and we talk about that we just that we deal with as a team. And I think that just from my larger involvement with like all day DevOps and the DevOps community, I think I just maybe I'll say it's settled law, right?
Right.
But I think it's. I hope that it's settled that if you're running DevOps, then you need to have security in there. You should know that at least. But whether you've been able to do it successfully and how is quite another question.
So we're a bit over time, and we're right at the end, folks. So stick around with us. I know we're over the hour mark, but we're having such a fun conversation. I don't want it to end. I feel like this is one of my favorite Joe Rogan episodes, right? Where you're just, Joe's talking to his guest, and they're just going at it, and it's like hour 2 hour. You don't even notice it.
Yeah.
You're listening, and it's a great conversation. And I just looked at our clock, and I'm like, oh wow, it's been an hour already.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get right into our CISO insight round, folks. It's that time where we put our CISO Mark Willis today, folks, the CISO at Bluescape, on the hot seat.
Uh-oh.
6 questions, 1 word. Only I get to ask if I want an explanation, folks. So just so you know, I'm gonna walk outside to my graveyard right now. I've got a buzzword graveyard in my backyard. It's got a bunch of headstones. My neighbors think I'm really weird. I tell them it's my daughter's boyfriends that I bury out here. AI, ML, you name it. Pick one buzzword you'd want to get rid of forever.
Single pane of glass.
Why? Because that's a first. First of all, I got to dig a new grave today. I'm glad it's raining outside, so the ground is ripe for a dig.
I know people like to use it, and I just think it's a term that's old, overused, and stale. And the analogy I use is when you go to buy a house and you look through one window, do you buy the house based upon just that one window you look through? No, you go inside and you walk around, right? When you walk down the street in New York City and you stop at a shop and you look in the window, right? You look through, but you don't see everything. You go inside to find out more. There's only so much you can see from a dashboard, from one single pane of glass. And I think sales companies, the sales teams, vendors have really overused that term. They've abused it. And I think it's lost its meaning. At least for me, it's lost its meaning. When I hear that term, I tend to tune out the sales pitch from that point on. I'm like, okay, I want to hear something else. I don't want to hear this old tired cliche. Please come up with something more original. That's just me. It may work for other people. I'm just tired of it.
Well, first of all, you never have to justify what you feel like needs to be buried. Okay, that is the whole point of this question. The whole point of the buzzword graveyard at the CISO Talk podcast is that we bury buzzwords we don't like. And you've given a very, very solid explanation. I think the house example is brilliant. I think anyone who's in marketing right now or in sales or in business development that's listening can get a lot of value from just that one statement. Right? There's no such thing as a single, like we all talk about having, people talk about dashboard fatigue for CISOs, right? You have 8-9 different dashboards. Now, if I have 8 or 9 different dashboards and they're all giving me the same data, I'm absolutely fatigued. But if I've got 8 different dashboards that are giving me 8 different data points, I'm not really fatigued. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It depends on what you're looking at the time, right?
Right.
But if somebody comes knocking on the door and says, "Hey, I've got the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it's a single pane of glass," I tend to be very skeptical.
So I put all buzzwords in a spam folder, meaning if you send me an email and it's got buzzwords I absolutely despise, it goes directly into spam. It never makes my inbox. Do you do the same?
Yeah. I'll just probably hit delete.
Oh, so you still get it in your inbox? I don't even see those emails. Like, I've had vendors that I've met at conferences that go, "Hey, James, I sent you a bunch of emails and you never replied." And I go, "Okay, what was in your email?" And they go, "Well, stuff." And I was like, "Did you have any of the list of these buzzwords?" I've got a Word doc with all the buzzwords that never make it into my inbox. And he goes, "Yeah." I go, "You made it to spam, never made it in my inbox. I'm never reading your email."
Yeah. A lot of them do go to my spam, but the ones that make it through, and they make it through for whatever reason. Not to say that it would have that term in it, but I get a lot of sales pitch. LinkedIn, right? I get LinkedIn all the time.
All day long, man.
All day long. "Hi, Mark," and I'm like, I don't know who you are.
All day long.
I'm just like, oh my god, yeah.
For those salespeople that are listening, we're not complaining about you. We realize you have a job to do, which is to reach out to us and present a solution that you feel can help us in our security cause in our organization. But maybe I think what Mark and I intend to say, and I'll speak on behalf of us, and Mark, if I'm wrong, you can say, "James, you're absolutely wrong. That's not what I mean." When you come to us on LinkedIn, say, introduce yourself, have a humanly conversation with us before you sell us something. I get these messages, and I'll tell you a really frustrating story. You brought it up, so I'm going to have to do it, and I've shared it, I think, in one of the previous podcasts. But I accepted this connection request from someone who's a business development manager at a specific security company, and within 10 minutes, I get a message from that person, and the message was like, "Hey, I'm doing this. I want a bunch of CISOs to check out our product." Never replied to it. I'm like, yeah, no, I don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
Really, like, just never replied. A week later, I get an update this long. The CISOs that have tested our product are... I'm like, I didn't... No, why? Why are you doing this? 3 days later, I get a second message. Longer. Literally, I think the Constitution of Independence is shorter than the email I got. Same thing. Okay. About a week later, I get the third email. So after the third email, I'm like, okay, apparently this person doesn't get the message I'm trying to deliver. So I write him a very polite email and I say, hello, so-and-so. Thank you so much for connecting. You know, I don't tend to not accept any connections. You know, I want to connect with people. I want to, you know, but please take this feedback as a learning lesson. But I never signed up for your work group to begin with. You're sending a bunch of emails with a bunch of information that I have no way to compare that relevant information, and it's not going to allow me to engage with you.
Yeah.
I might end up blocking you, and I haven't blocked anyone in my life in LinkedIn unless they were Chinese or Russian.
Right. Yeah, I usually accept the connections, but I like. It's almost like I like to hit. You know, I hit accept, and then see how long it is before they pitch something. You know.
Well, I know if I'm going to get a pitch by when they send me a connection request, if there's a note, and you can always tell by the note. So I get notes that say, hey, I listened to your podcast, wanted to connect, accept those. I know I'll typically get an email after that just says, hey, love your podcast. Thanks so much for doing what you're doing. And that's great. I love those. I don't mind those. And
I've had some sneaky ones that don't put that in there because you can see it, right? You just do the accept. And then, like, you know, an hour later, like you said, then you get the message. Then they follow up, right?
Well, I get ones that say, you and I have 27 mutual connections, so I thought I'd connect with you as well. And then I look at who our 27 mutual connections are, and I'm like, yeah, we're not connecting, because I realize you're going to try to sell me something.
Yeah.
And especially accountants and lawyers and people who want to do SOC 2 reports. One technology that will change the way you do cybersecurity.
One thing we're looking at right now is a small startup. I'm not going to name the name yet, but they have a pretty cool concept of database access, traffic, in and out awareness using AI machine learning that's going on. A pretty cool small dashboard, not a single pane of glass, but it is a pretty cool looking thing that we're working with a small startup to learn more about. That would give us visibility into the really database activity anomalies that we would be looking to pull in to our larger security program. So that's one thing that I'm really interested in, is heading down the path of really finding a really solid, cool database anomaly type behavioral analysis tool that can give us feedback almost real time on what's going on within the activity within the database itself.
Awesome. The last book you read?
Actually, I have it here. I know that you asked those questions. So let's see if I can hold it up here. Oh.
Other way. There we go.
So this is a cool book, Nomenclator Initium. It's one of 4 books. Only 1 and 2 have been written so far. So this guy, Bill O'Malley, has only written the first 2. It's a great book. It's written from the perspective, so it's AD 15, and Seneca interviewing Polybius who was the slave to Julius Caesar. Now, Polybius is like 94 years old by this time. And the story is that Seneca wanted to know what Caesar was like, the man, not all the great stories. He wanted to know the good and the bad, the faults. What was he really like? So he tracked it through his father. They lived nearby. Polybius, who was 94, had been a slave to Caesar and had gained his freedom. But he talks in the first book, talks about how he had been a slave for Cato, and then faked epilepsy, was sold in the market. Caesar bought him, and then he ended up becoming Caesar's slave. And it's really interesting. All the names Cicero and all Cato and all the people that were in and around Caesar at that time, in all the meetings and all the discussions and all the things. And so, again, it's just the first book. I'm ready to order the second. But it's really a great way to escape from today when you need that escape to go back. And then when you read, obviously you're like, well, people today aren't so different than the Romans. I mean, the technology is different, right? But, ambition, desire, love, hate, anger, jealousy, all those things that were going on back then, that's still happening today.
Well, that's human nature.
Yeah,
right?
It's human nature. So
human nature. Adam and Eve still exist today. You still eat from the forbidden tree. The last movie you saw?
The last movie I saw was Irresistible. It was on. Jon Stewart directed it. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not.
Okay, and I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't seen it, but it was very clever. The ending is very clever, and I'll just say in general, it really shows the breakdown of how both political parties in this country will pretty much stop at nothing to destroy each other, to try to win, in this case, a small town in Wisconsin mayoral race.
Yeah, we won't get into politics on this podcast.
Right.
Those that want to get into politics can join me on one of my YouTube lives or Periscope lives. We talk a little bit about that there.
Yeah.
We live in a very, very interesting time politically. I don't think we've had this amount of divisiveness in this nation since its inception.
And the thing is, I think with this movie, James, even no matter what party, even if you're like an independent, no matter where you come from, I think it's actually a movie that most people would actually enjoy and laugh at, regardless of what party you belong to. I think people say, aha, yeah, there's a lot of truth to this story, even though it's fictional and it's a comedy, but it's pretty clever.
So there's a really funny election movie with Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis, where they're running for mayor, and that they make fun of the whole political process, right? And so I find those movies to be very, very fascinating of how people look at politicians, but I think what's happening right now is a very, very challenging time for our nation. Favorite music? All right.
Favorite music depends on what mood I'm in, right? So if I'm in a creative mood, you're talking to someone grew up in Northern California, parents drove around listening to a lot of Dylan and mamas and papas, a lot of 60s music. So when I get creative, I turn on the 60s music. I play the guitar, play the harmonica, and I'm not Bob Dylan, but I like to pretend like sometimes, and I've done a few songs. You just record for my friends, and I actually wrote a song about the death of George Floyd that I've played. I've shared with a few people at Bluescape. We actually have a band at Bluescape called the Blue Scapegoats, and and so we played Roadhouse Blues by the Doors as our debut song, and I did the harmonica and on the green bullet, like the old time microphone. It came out really well. We have a great band. Wasn't expecting to join a band. When I joined Bluescape, it just kind of evolved. When I'm working out, I'll crank up something like the AC/DC, something loud. Classical music, I love classical music. But then, as I tell people, sometimes I just like to go in the forest and listen to the forest and the music of the music of the animals and everything that's going on, the wind and everything. Just being alone in the forest has a sound all to its own. So when I'm out hiking in the woods with my family in the weekends, and sometimes they'll go ahead of me, and I'll just stop and listen to what's going on around me. It's that's a good, that's nice music as well.
If you're ever in Georgia, you're welcome to my backyard. My backyard is the woods. I've got owls, deers, chipmunks, squirrels, birds, hawks, you name it.
Snakes.
Snakes. I got black snakes. Got frogs. I'm looking at my window right now at my backyard, and typically on Friday mornings, our pack of deers is here eating some of the green. They're a little late today, so I sure hope no one decided to hit them with the car. But they used to be 4, now they're 8, and I think the herd is going to grow by a few more. They're a fun herd. And so, what's one thing you took away from the COVID-19 crisis?
Okay, so one thing that I really felt was a confirmation, an affirmation of everything that I'd been talking about for the past 10 years with regards to working at home. When I worked at Aetna, I worked at home for 10 years. I would travel and go to conferences and go to the main office in Hartford, but for the most part, I was working from home. And I knew that I was more productive working at home than I was when I went to the office, because when I went to the office, everybody wanted to talk and hang out, which was cool, right? But as far as getting things done, it always set me back. When I come back from a trip to Aetna in Hartford, I had to work on the weekend to catch up on all the emails and all the work that I wasn't able to do, like I would normally do during the week. So I realized that working from home was a great way to get things done. And like you said, you work around schedules, you work around life, kids, family, and what have you. But I knew that even when COVID broke out, there were people who couldn't wait to get back in the office early on, right? This is going to be over. We're going to go back in. How can anybody be productive working from home, let alone a whole company, right? We need to see people with their butt in the seat. I need to see someone sitting at a computer. I need to see someone, they've got to be in the office. Otherwise, they're not productive. And while that's true for some people, perhaps, I knew the majority of people, if this went on, which it has, that people would realize that we are as much or more productive working from home as we were when we were in the office. I knew that going into this. And so COVID-19, as bad as it has been, as sad as the whole story is, has affirmed my stance on working from home. And I think a lot of people, from what I'm hearing, CIOs in the Bay Area are coming around and saying, you know what, we may want to do this even longer than we had talked about. Yeah. There will always be those going, kicking and screaming to the very end, right? They're going to hang on and, I'm not giving up. We're going back in the office.
They're going to die on that hill.
And that may be the hill that they die on, right? Do the real estate and all that, the prices. People are finding out for many reasons, not just the productivity, but the costs involved of renting an office and leasing an office and real estate, that it might be cheaper to be able to just keep us at home.
And it's not just real estate. It's the insurance, it's the utilities. I mean, the cost there is significant, and that cost could be driven to really promote the well-being of employees instead of having them go through that rat race, right? Of sitting in traffic. I mean, I've been working from home for 10 years. Even when I had an office, I would never go when, people would show up at 8 or 9 o'clock. I wouldn't go until traffic died down.
Yeah.
And it was 10 minutes from my house. But if it took me 20 minutes to get to my office, I'd be ticked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
When I was at Bluescape, I would get up in the morning and go in early. I catch an Uber and go in early. I don't like traffic, period. I drove the DC traffic. I drove in that traffic for years, man.
Oh, DC traffic, man. DC traffic is the definition of Washington, D.C. It's just clogged up, and it sucks, and no, DC traffic, no, never again. Never again. I'm so glad they're doing a metro system, like the train system in DC, because I'm like, oh, finally.
Yeah.
Finally, someone's getting this thing about no. Like, I won't do it. Like, when I go to DC, I'm like, no. If I know I got to be at the Rainburn building, I'm booking a hotel where I can walk to the Rainburn building.
Yeah. I mean, if they need to run the metro all the way out to Front Royal to the west, all the way down to Richmond to the south, all the way up to Baltimore to the north. I mean, just one line, right? I mean, that would help a lot it's a huge project, but I mean, that's really what it would take to cut
We're
back
the
on the track.
richest country in the world. We have an ungodly economy. I still don't understand how we're not solving our transportation challenges.
Priorities, my friend.
Priorities indeed are true. Folks, Mark Willis joining me. We are way over time, Mark. way over time, but I hope you all enjoyed this podcast. Mark, thank you so much for coming on. For folks tuning in and listening, cyberhubpodcast.com, where you can get all of our podcasts, including this one and our CyberHub podcast, our Tech Corner, which this week features Aviv Grafi. He's the CEO of Votiro, and we talk a little bit about phishing emails and ransomware attacks and a bunch of really cool stuff. You can get that there. You can also get our practitioner brief in your inbox daily, a great 1-page, 2-page document with all the links to everything you need to know about patching, vulnerabilities, and none of the clickbait stuff, the stuff that really matters for security practitioners. That's it for us here today, folks. Thanks so much for listening to CISO Talk Podcast. Thank you so much for Mark and his generosity with his time. I really wanted to do this face-to-face at RSA, but we couldn't. RSA was just such a weird time, and Mark was just so new in his role, and now that he's seasoned and in, we'll have him back again, I'm sure of it. Until next time, folks, thanks so much for listening. Next week, we'll have a BISO on the show, talking a little, one of the oldest BISOs in his role will be joining us all the way from beautiful London, I shall say. Will be a great episode as we talk about BISOs and CISOs and all the things that come along with that. So make sure you subscribe, give us 5 stars. Until next week, folks, my name is James Azar. Mark Willis, we're signing off and letting you all to please, folks, please, whatever you do, stay cyber safe.